So
Yeah.
as part of my introduction to this presentation, I'll tell you my story with regard to what motivated me to be involved in mother tongue-based multilingual education. And my motivation stemmed from my own language experiences as a young schoolgirl. When I started school in rural Tharaka, a minority language community in Kenya, instruction was not offered in my mother tongue, Kitharaka, but in Kimenti, a neighboring language, a language I did not speak or understand. Besides Kimenti, the school also added two other languages, English and Kiswahili, bringing the total number of languages that my classmates and I had to grapple with to 4. That is the two school languages, the neighboring language that was taught as mother tongue, and our own mother tongue, Kitharaka. Can I advance? Okay. So here we were. Sorry. Oh my.
Oops.
So here we were, a class full of 6-year-olds thrown in the deep end of a swimming pool of languages with little or no support. We did not have many options. It was either we swim or sink. I was among the lucky few that survived the language challenge and managed to swim against all odds. Sadly, majority of my classmates drowned in that pool, unable to swim through the language barrier in education. And in the next slide, that illustration by my colleague, Dr. Dennis Malone, exemplifies or illustrates exactly what happened in our situation. Where the foreign language is used, you can see the narrow bridge and so many children in the water, drowning in the river because they could not swim across, given the language barrier. So I was lucky to maybe that little girl standing across the river on the right could be me, and a few other people that made it through that river. Renee? I carried these experiences with me even as I continued my academic pursuits. While I was doing my master's in the UK, I became even more aware of how prevalent the challenge of learning in unfamiliar language was, especially in Africa and Asia. Not to say that it's not in other places, but that was the focus of my study. When I returned to Kenya after my studies, I worked with numerous language communities in Kenya and in several African countries to develop teaching learning materials in all subject areas in local languages. I conducted teacher trainings and facilitated advocacy dialogues, both at the grassroots level and at the national level, all in an effort to make it possible for children to learn in their mother tongues. Although we did this with a lot of success, we experienced a lot of challenges in classrooms where children came from diverse language backgrounds. So when I undertook my doctoral studies, my aim was to find a solution to this new challenge that we encountered, and which had become a frequently asked question by various stakeholders of the programs. That is, how do you deal with linguistic diversity in multilingual classroom settings? And that became the focus of my study. And data collection and writing up my thesis was an extremely emotional process, as it exposed the linguistic, even academic injustices that continue to be meted on children who come to school speaking first languages that are different from the school language. At the end of my studies, my resolve to continue being a voice for the over 2 million school-aged children around the world today who speak L1s that are not recognized in the school system was greater than when I first began. And so my PhD thesis was dedicated to them. And this is the dedication that I wrote for my PhD thesis. I dedicate this thesis to the millions of children around the world today who are struggling to make sense of education delivered in languages they do not speak or understand. I hope that the issues raised in this research report will someday brighten the faces of some little angels when their linguistics needs are considered in language and education policy decisions, as well as the design and delivery of curriculum. Until that happens, Haruta continua. And I am here today making this presentation because of that resolve. So please stay with me. Okay. So after sharing my story, I have mentioned a few things like mother tongue. We might be wondering, what is mother tongue education? What is multilingual, mother tongue-based multilingual education, and those kinds of questions. So we'll start by defining these terms. And the first term that we will define is mother tongue. And the mother tongue refers to the first language in which a child learns to express herself or himself. In some contexts, besides being the language learned first, it also,
Whoops.
sorry. Yeah, in some contexts, besides being the language learned first, it also includes the language with which one identifies and which others use in identifying one as a native speaker of. For many, the mother tongue is the language best known and most used. It is often used synonymously with first language and home language. The next term that we are going to define is mother tongue education. And mother tongue education generally refers to the use of learners' mother tongue, first language, as the medium of instruction. In mother tongue education, the L1, which is the first language, is mostly also taught as a subject in order to develop it as a language for academic development. Mother tongue education is used synonymously with mother tongue instruction, because when you are teaching in all the subjects in that language, then it becomes mother tongue instruction. And the next term is mother tongue-based multilingual education. Mother tongue-based multilingual education refers to an education program that begins in the learner's L1, helps the learners to build fluency and confidence in the L2 or other additional language as required, and encourages them to use both the L1 and L2 or additional languages to achieve quality education. Mother tongue-based multilingual education is the term currently in use as it addresses the fears that many, especially parents, have that their children will learn only in their own language when the term mother tongue education is used. So it removes that controversy. So what are the linkages between one's mother tongue or L1 and the identity or culture and even academic development? Patanayak says that mother tongue is the expression of the primary identity of a human being. So you can see that he links mother tongue directly to the identity of any person. It is the language through which a person perceives the surrounding world and through which initial concept formation takes place. The child is acclimatized to its environment through naming each object, phenomenon, and mood of changing nature through the mother tongue. Hernandez says that on a cultural level, language is symbolic expression of a community, encoding a group's values, its folkways, and its history. Socially, language is the most powerful means of interaction and communication, and it is through language that an individual or a group seeks and attains participation in society. And finally, he says that the denial of a people's development and use of its native tongue is thus a denial of its participation in society and its very peoplehood. Another scholar, a renowned scholar in the mother tongue education space, says to reject a child's language in school is to reject the child. When the message, implicit or explicit, communicated to children in the school is, leave your language and culture at the schoolhouse door. Children also leave a central part of who they are, that is their identities, at the schoolhouse door. You can see the effect of not having a child's language in class there. Leporanta Molly says it is so strange when you learn in a new language, even if you think you understand what those words mean, deep inside, you still don't understand. But when you learn in your own language, you understand deep inside your innermost self what everything means. And Leporanta here was quoting a child that he had interviewed, a child that was going through the language experiences in a Finnish, in a Swedish school coming from Finland. UNESCO, so many years ago in 1953, already agreed that it is axiomatic that the best medium for teaching a child is his or her mother tongue. Psychologically, there is a system of meaningful signs that in his or her mind works automatically for expression and understanding. Socially, it is the means of identification among the members of the community to which he or she belongs. And educationally, he or she learns more quickly through it than through an unfamiliar medium. So, having looked at these linkages and having shared my story and these linkages between language and identity, are there any benefits of teaching in the mother tongue? Why do institutions like UNESCO, UNICEF, Save the Children, why do they advocate for the teaching of children or education in the mother tongue? Like UNESCO's axiom, leading scholars in the field of mother tongue-based multilingual education agree that children's L1 is the most effective language for early literacy and content area instruction. Professor Wolf, a leading scholar on matters language and education, says that language is not everything in education, but without language, everything is nothing in education, which makes the choice of language in education very critical for educators and policymakers. The first benefit that I'm going to discuss is that mother tongue education assures better and faster acquisition of literacy. When you teach a child how to read and write in unfamiliar language, that language becomes a barrier to their literacy acquisition or literacy development. In 2015, Twaweza, in their groundbreaking report dubbed Are Our Children Reading?, revealed that many children cannot read their grade level text with fluency and understanding, and this is attributable to the language of literacy. A few years ago in Kenya, we woke up to a shocking revelation by the Kenya National Literacy Survey report, which showed that there are learners who complete primary school, grade 8, without learning how to read. I can tell you Kenya is no exception in this one, because reports have shown that very many children are not reading by the end of primary school. At the same time, every known program that has used the mother tongue for literacy has reported that children are learning to read within the first year of school and perfecting that in consecutive years. And this includes adult literacy programs where women and men are reported to learn to read in their mother tongues in a record 6 months. What is done differently in the MT classes? A few things, but the language choice plays a great role in the results we are seeing in these programs from what is reported where the language used is unfamiliar. A second benefit of teaching in the mother tongue of the child or the first language of the child is that teachers use more interactive and effective teaching methods. Here, the use of the language that children understand allows teachers to use more interactive and more effective teaching methods, which are learner-centered when compared to teacher-centered approaches that are adopted when unfamiliar language is used. Why is this the case? Because teachers are limited on how to innovate when the language of instruction limits their learners from participating in classroom activities and interactions. When unfamiliar language is used, classroom instructions are reduced to repetition, where the teacher says and the children repeat, and responding to ritualized participation principles, where a teacher looks for ways of involving the children, even if that means just shouting and repeating things that they do not understand. And I have documented that very well in my doctoral thesis, which is available online. Keep going, Rene. Again, mother tongue promotes more classroom participation and interaction. And here, numerous studies have shown that the use in education of languages that the learners know results in more classroom participation. Why does that happen? Because learners are able to follow what the teacher is saying, ask questions, and seek clarifications when they do not understand. A presentation here right now in Kitharaka, how many of you would still be following and with understanding? If I ask questions in Kitharaka in this presentation, how many would respond? If you cannot follow what I am saying, how would you even ask a question? So that one doesn't even require us to go out there and do research. It has already been done, but that illustration helps to demonstrate these points. Okay, a fourth benefit of mother tongue education is that it lays the foundation for learning other languages. There is cumulative evidence showing that children who begin learning in English from their first day in school, and English is not their first language, they experience more difficulties in learning the English is learning English language than those who begin instruction in their mother tongue while learning English as a second language. Williams, in his study of Nyanja and Chichewa-speaking children in Zambia and Malawi, reported that children from mother tongue medium schools outperformed those in English medium schools, both in English language tests and in other subject areas. That tells you that learning or being exposed to English too early when they really do not understand or not learning it as a second language, that it doesn't privilege those children. It actually becomes a disadvantage. Let's go on. Why does this happen? Why do children who begin learning in the mother tongue and learn English as a second language outperform those who go straight to English when it is not their mother tongue? Because the level of development of children's mother tongue has been shown to be a strong predictor of their second language development. I'm sure we've heard of children or even people who cannot express themselves in any language, not in their mother tongue, not in a second or third language, not in any language. That is what happened there. Another benefit is that mother tongue leads to better academic achievement and progress, because children get good grasp of the subject matter and content when it is delivered in a language they understand. This happens because teaching in a language that children do not understand reduces the number of unknowns that the children have to grapple with. When they are taught in a language that they understand, it reduces the number of unknowns, the content, the literacy, the numeracy, and the language. The studies by Fafunwa et al. In Nigeria, Thomas and Collier in the US, and Williams in Malawi and Zambia all found that children who begin learning in a familiar language achieve better, both in languages and content subjects, than those who begin in an unfamiliar language. And better academic achievement reduces the wastage witnessed through school dropouts, underachievement, and repetition of grades to a great extent. It doesn't eliminate it because it has other bases, but the language also accounts for a great extent of why that happens. In their 11 years longitudinal research on 42,000 minority language children in the US, Thomas and Collier report that the most powerful factor in predicting education success for minority language children is the amount of schooling they received in their first language. Another benefit is that learners learn with enjoyment. Learning is meant to be enjoyable or to be enjoyed by the learners. When an unfamiliar language is used in the classroom, learners have been shown to be timid and disengaged. Parents from experimental schools on the Kenyan programs reported that children even wanted to go to schools on Saturdays when they were learning in the mother tongue, while some children from controlled schools wanted to be transferred to mother tongue medium schools when they heard what was happening in those schools. A child cannot want to go to school on a Saturday if they are not enjoying school. Lack of enjoyment has been shown to result in such traits as absenteeism and truancy, which in turn leads to academic underachievement. Studies have also shown that mother tongue education boosts learners' self-esteem and confidence. This is because when children go to school, everything that they know, they do so in their mother tongue. The role of the teacher, therefore, should be to reaffirm what the children already know in their mother tongue. Reaffirmation gives the learners the confidence they need to want to learn new things in school. When they do not get that affirmation, resulting in the feeling of rejection in school, their identities are affected in adverse ways to the detriment of both their confidence and consequently their academic achievement. And mother tongue education encourages parental involvement. Studies have shown that when children are taught in languages that their parents understand, there is more parental support in the education of their children. Parents are able to do homework with their children, read or tell stories to their children as part of schoolwork. Some parents, even those with little education, become teaching assistants to their teachers in mother tongue instruction classes where they come and tell stories and talk about the culture in ways that cannot be expressed in other languages. And some parents have taken part in writing of stories for their children during instructional materials development workshops. So, having heard the benefits that accrue to a learner that begins learning in their first language, and those are linguistics, there are linguistic benefits, there are academic benefits, there are social benefits, even I would like us to think about these questions in the light of this presentation. Does education for all include everyone? Does it include the 221 plus million children around the world today who are L1 speakers of languages not recognized in the education system? Sustainable Development Goal number 4 on inclusive and quality education for all. Does inclusive education for all include everyone? Can we talk about quality education in the absence of understanding what is taught? Can education be said to be inclusive if it excludes linguistic minority children in classroom interactions? And the third question is, given the benefits, that is linguistic benefits, cognitive or academic benefits, cultural and psychological benefits that accrue to learners who begin schooling in languages they speak and understand, what role can we as educators play in promoting mother tongue instruction in our institutions and the spaces we find ourselves in? And my submissions to us are, I contend that we can never boost both of thought. And it is indisputable that children need the English language and or other international languages of wider communication to interact at particular levels with the outside world. But it is problematic to make the possibility of such interaction the basis for deciding what language to use as medium of instruction in early literacy. My second submission is, it is also true that the cost of sensible and socially just literacy development must be weighed up against the wastage witnessed in our education systems, as evidenced in learners dropping out of school, having to repeat grades, and other evidence of non-achievement in school, as revealed by various studies. As we invest in education of our children, may we never lose sight of these two facts. And this was, I actually picked these two from a presentation that was done in AMI conference in Stellenbosch in 2018. We never lose sight of these two facts, that an investment in a child yields up to 7 times return to society. And the earlier the investment, the greater the return. And my final submission is to invite us to consider what Save the Children has to say. And I quote, "It is unfair to expect young children to begin learning subject content in a second language. Yet, it is impractical to postpone teaching the child until they've acquired second language proficiency. It is most logical and fair, therefore, to begin teaching all children in their first language whilst teaching them the second or additional languages until they are ready to learn in that second language." In conclusion, teaching children in a language they speak and understand when they begin school has been equated to building for them a strong bridge across a big river. In contrast, teaching them in an unfamiliar language has been equated to building a thin, weak, even slippery bridge across a swelling river, or throwing them into the deep end of a swimming pool and expecting them to swim, like was done to me. So, what will you build as an educator? A strong or a weak bridge? Thank you. Asanteni sana. Back to you, Renee.
I was the note taker for our group. So the key themes that we identified is number one, the importance of teacher training. So whoever's in the environment with the child actually knows how to read and write in their own language, in their mother tongue. So that children who are in an environment have someone who can speak and hopefully read their mother tongue. Then also the importance of preschool age in language acquisition. One of the members of our group was involved in a school where there were 3 languages spoken. So it's important for the all languages to be spoken and then also transcribed into the written word, so that the child makes the identity, the association between what they're hearing and then how it's written down in order to be able to read. And she saw great success in that environment. And then if there are many languages in one environment, either the classroom or the home, it's important for the one person, one language policy. So each adult speaks one language so that the children don't get confused and speak gobbledygook. Then what we loved about Susan's talk was the parental involvement, getting parents who can come into the environment to expose the children to the mother tongue, verbally, orally telling stories, but even greater would be to have parents who are literate that can actually read stories to the children. And then the last thing we identified was if you as a teacher are not fluent in the mother tongue of the children that you're teaching, that you introduce other cultural aspects. For example, celebrate key holidays in that culture, and give that culture attention in other ways if you can't speak the language.
Thank you so much, Helen. Anyone else from another group? Ahmad, I see your raised hand.
Hello, everyone. So the topic we discussed, me and my group, was basically how much is it applicable, this language barriers for the ages of 0 to 6, or the ages of the absorbent mind, and knowing that the absorbent mind is in a place where the child is in acquisition, and in a monastery setting, every language is taught first and through spoken language and through the use of objects or pictures, so they can relate to a real life experience. So how would be a challenge for the child if we're still giving them the sensory material and the spoken language of this new language that the child is learning? So that was the first topic that we tried to discuss. And what Miss Allison concluded was that the bridge is the sensory instructions, right? So the sensory instructions is what helps the child bridge from his own knowledge, from what's familiar to what is unfamiliar, through seeing these pictures that he can relate in his mind. For example, this is a frog, and in Arabic, this is dufta, for example, right? So he can do that link. And of course, we also talked about how much time the child needs until he can consolidate that information, that he can physically express himself to let us know that he understood that information. And as we all know that the children from ages, especially from the ages 0 to 3, they mentally understand you, but they don't have the physical capability to show you that they understand you, right? So that was the first concept that we talked about. The second concept that we talked about is what does the market really demand, right? So for most of the schools these days, the parents demand second language, whether it's English or French or German. So they kind of imply, or they kind of demand, or forces the school to teach that second language, and to a certain extent, create the mother tongue as a second language, right? So because they want to prepare their children for the business world, and create so they can be ready for real life experiences. And this is where we had like a question mark about how can we solve this issue. And especially the parents go with the concept of they're already learning the mother tongue at home, so if I'm going to send him to school, so why not teach him the new language? So like that, I can teach him the mother language in the house, and he can the child will learn the new language in the school, and that will complete the cycle of his learning.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. Anyone from any other group? Yes, Nancy?
Yes. Thank you. There are 4 of us from our group, and all 4 of us come from different countries where multilingualism, multiculturalism exists. So from Vietnam, who is our facilitator, myself from the Philippines, Kamir from Ethiopia, and Timothy from Nairobi.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm sharing this is because we all share this common struggle. We identified a lot of problems. For example, the common struggle of the government imposing a national language to be used in the system of education. But in our communities, we speak our own language. So definitely the presentation of Susan today is very helpful in accepting the fact that, yes, mother tongue is really key in education, in making the children understand that it's important for them to absorb in their own mother language, mother tongue. So Timothy brought this need for even the creation of materials that can be distributed to the different communities because of the importance of, creating them in their own name, in their own language, but also in the presentation of these materials. So that's one. And in Nairobi, Kenya, for example, they have 52 different ethnic groups. And each of these 52 different ethnic groups have their own native language. So we identified problems. And Mai said that in the case of China, the government there, the first emperor there, imposed this national language. Philippines tried that too, actually. We use Filipino, but we are encountering a lot of problems with that because I myself comes from a different province and we speak Karaya. And in my next town, there's Ilonggo and others. So we identified problems, and these are the problems we identified. Availability of materials, when you give lessons, you need those materials. The attitude of the adults, because really, it's a fact that most parents generally prefer English, for example, to be the medium of instruction. It's a language that brings you to communicate with other people, brings you, in the case of the Philippines, it's a language that makes you marketable if you speak English. So that's that. And then textbooks, availability of textbooks. And then the translation of these materials or textbooks to that language, we need people, and then the trained adults in a Montessori setting. So there's a lot of barriers. But then Mai said that in Vietnam, they have started this practical approach to start small. So wherever in your community where there are people who have the skills and knowledge to translate, for example, the textbooks, and to gather people on a volunteer basis to create these materials, that will be a one step. And the other idea is just to bring people together and encourage more training in places where people speak their own native tongue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Anyone from another group? We still have a few. Yeah, I see.
I can go next. So many, my name's Rochelle, and we also had a very wide distribution. So from Japan to Kenya and Uganda, the US. Interesting, the difference between Japan and the US, where our national language is also our primary school language, right? Versus Uganda and Kenya, where there is the adoption of a national language, but then now it seems that there's kind of this introduction of a second national language, which is really crowding out mother tongue, right? It's making it more difficult to hold space for it. Other groups have said many of the same things that we talked about. I would lift, I think, one thing that someone just said, parents are not always the best advocates for this, right? Because they want their children to learn the languages that will help them to be successful, right? They want them to be able to communicate with the outside world and get and have more opportunity. And so that's an interesting thing. And as well, it can be difficult for educators as well, right? So someone mentioned that idea of, if as a teacher, if I am not comfortable in native tongue, or if I don't believe if I believe that children should be learning these national or trade languages, or then that also is a challenge, right? So we need to get those minds. One thing that really struck me was this notion of being intentional about valuing kind of indigenous and regional dialects, right? It really being very conscious of preserving languages, because in a place where, for example, I think in Uganda, was it in Uganda? I think, no, in Kenya, Francesca said, right, there are 50 plus languages that people speak. And the less we the less we allow communities to preserve those languages, the more likely it is that we're going to lose them. And I know that in the US, in our indigenous communities, that has been a real focus, right? Recapturing languages, even to the point of teaching all of the adults in the community how to speak them again. So that's, I think, what we had to share.
Thank you, Rochelle. Susan, I see your raised hand.
Thank you. Just appreciating the rich discussions that have gone on, and throwing in one comment that sometimes parents demand the second language for children who do not speak that language because they do not know better. So as educators, we should be the ones helping them understand why it is important to begin in the languages that their children are speaking at home. We've done that I talked about advocacy, and that is exactly what we would do. Even teachers themselves, there are those you'll find who are not convinced. Even policymakers, you'll find those that are not convinced that learning in the mother tongue is a good thing. So what we do is try to help them understand why it is a good thing. And my final thought is, sometimes when I did advocacy with teachers and parents, I would pose this question. Looking at the benefits that your child or your learner will have if you introduce them to education in a language or to literacy in a language that they speak and understand, including being able to speak that second language that you really want them to learn. The mother tongue will give them a better foundation for second and third language learning. Would you still want the mother tongue not to be taught to your child? Sometimes parents will say, my child is already speaking the mother tongue, so they don't need that in school. But as educators, we know that we move from the known to the unknown. We start where the children are. Use the language that the child knows. They know that this is a cow. So use that cow to teach them math. Count the number of legs that a cow has, how many ears, how many heads. Use the same cow that the child knows to teach other concepts, other things that you can talk about the cow. And that is one of the things that we try to point out to parents and even teachers who argue that the child already knows the mother tongue. Because the mother tongue that a child knows by the time they come to you as a teacher is very little compared to what they can learn that can lay that foundation for language learning and for academic achievement in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Chi Kamau, I see your hand is raised. You're on mute, so I'm not sure if you're trying to say something. Okay, maybe it was by mistake. Is there anyone else? I know there's, yeah, Florencia.
Thank you. Yes, 5 of us in the group, all of us from different places and different situations. So we understand that it is important to define the situation of the children, the parents, the country, the objectives, and so that we have a solid program for children that really feeds into the connection with language in their mother tongue and the second language, L2, culturally, emotionally, spiritually. So the trained teacher, again, if we're going to be using this sensitivity to languages that we have been explained that the children have, and so the importance of never forgetting in your mother tongue and the language too, the songs, the books, the rhymes, the movements, the rituals, so that we expose not only language and knowledge, but culture, love, and we don't know what happens in the brain of these amazing, bright children that are so young and absorbing so many things. And so it is also important that we expose them to significant, meaningful things. That is important to take into consideration.
Thank you, Florencia. Is there one more group?
I can speak
Yeah.
quickly to our group. Yes, we had wonderful participants from India, experiences in India, Tibet, Finland, Mexico, Austria, United States. And I think one thing that was really interesting is the experiences that they shared of what it feels as an adult to come into a setting, in a situation, and how humbling it is when you don't know the language, and the importance of some of those experiences to understand what the children are going through. Jenny shared that when she worked in the rural areas of South India, she did not know the language, and how important it was for her to be familiar with the mother tongue to earn the respect and the trust of the children that she worked with. And also appreciated that she shared that she did not have confidence in the language because she didn't know the language, but she had confidence in the Montessori materials. And she knew that the Montessori scheme, the Montessori methods and practices for language would help her to teach the language. It can adapt to any language, and that was a support for the children and for her. She also shared that it was more challenging in the elementary than in the primary, but how helping them to learn their language, not just the language, but also the dialects, is really, really important. And let's see, I lost my train of thought there. To keep them, yes, that the mother tongue in the elementary language. And that ties in with some things that Susan shared with the importance of understanding those later ages, that adolescents who are coming in as refugees are measured unfairly against their peers who can learn and take exams in their own first language, because as they're learning the language, it's not in their mother tongue. The instruction is not in their mother tongue. And so having some supports for our adolescents who may be experiencing this in a refugee type of situation is very, very important as well. So that's a general summary of some of the things that we talked about.
Thank you, Victoria. Is there one last group, or was that it? I think there is maybe one last one. You can unmute yourself, or maybe I did not count accurately.
It's hello, it's Jenny. I can't get my video to work, so I don't know whether it's and I didn't think to say where we all came from. I just thought, oh, we're all from the world.
No problem.
Yeah. So, but Patty worked with children in English and also in Spanish, and she realized that a lot of these children love to hear her sing in English. So that was an interesting experience for her. And Caddy, let me see, she said it was difficult understanding the culture, and that the children had 30 minutes of English. And it was also difficult to talk with the children. And but it seemed I'm sorry.
I don't know that we have time for this, but I don't think I was clear. I was in a country where they only received 30 minutes of their mother tongue instruction.
Oh,
and
sorry.
Otherwise, they were immersed in an English language, a second language, and but so it was sort of the opposite of what's being advised here. But because I loved their culture and I was learning their language, hopefully they were still being affirmed in their identity.
Thank you for helping me. I couldn't really hear what you were saying. Maybe that was the problem with the others. I don't know. Maybe they'd like to come in and just give a little account of what they said. Would you like to do that for safety's sake? The rest of my group. Caddy, no, you're there. Caddy is there. It's Casey and Patty and Maria Helene. Very quick.
I was just going to say, I think that was what was interested is with Katie, she has traveled all over the world and she ended up teaching in a school in Egypt. And not to discount anything that Susan's been saying. I'm sorry, my dog is exercising his vocal cords right now, his language right now. But what was interesting, what she was talking about is that she didn't see that the children were lacking in their development in having mostly been taught in English. But then we talked about maybe it was because the whole school was immersed in the culture, and the minority of the teachers were the ones coming in and teaching English. And so we just kind of had this conversation about identity and if she was able to affirm their identity, even though they weren't being taught in their mother tongue for the majority of the day. Did I get that right, Katie?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I think that was all the groups. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Could I please say something? Could I please say something?
Sure.
I just want everyone to, I'm an AMI primary trainer. I just want everyone to know that when we leave, that wherever we go for our training, we really, Dr. Susan, we stress on the importance of mother tongue. For example, I went and taught, I did a training in Egypt, and we're talking about developing an Arabian language scheme. We did work in Vietnam. I did 3 courses, and for the 3rd course, we had created a Vietnamese language scheme that followed Montessori language scheme, and our students did the Vietnamese language scheme, not the English language scheme, so they could go back and teach children the Vietnamese language scheme, but following the Montessori method. So I just want everyone to realize, and Dr. Susan, to thank you for your inputs, that we also realize that, and we are doing this wherever we are. Like the Tibetan refugee community, we've got wonderful materials. The only thing that's really lacking is the reading definition booklet. But we really build that so that mother tongue is really present for the first time learner. So I just want to thank Dr. Susan for this wonderful talk, and thank you everybody for the work you do. Thank you.
Thank